Hey guys, what's up? In this video, I'm going to be comprehensively talking about Figma grids and the new introduction of the layout property that you see on the right and how you can use grid for a lot of different scenarios. This is going to be a really long video, but hopefully it helps you understand most of the things about Figma grids. We're going to be creating a bunch of different concepts as well, like this one, where we have a bunch of images in a grid type layout. Next, we're going to be taking this page from Untitled UI and actually structuring this content that you see in front of you in a 12-column grid, and then have another nested grid for these blog articles inside of it. Then we're going to take this existing dashboard design and convert this into a flat grid as well, with all of these, the header, the sidebar, and all of these different widgets actually sitting at the top level. Then we're going to be creating, or I'm going to be showing you an example of how certain components, like for example, a date picker, really makes sense as a grid and how easy it is to do things like this. Then I'm going to be creating in a matter of minutes a hero section like this using a grid layout and showing you another example of where grids can be used. And we're going to be updating this again in a matter of seconds to something like this and showing you how easy it is to modify things when they're sitting in a grid. So let's get into it. Now, before we even start talking about this, I want you to notice the change in the right-hand sidebar. Previously, when we used to just create a simple frame, let's say I'm going to create a frame, we did not have this layout option before. This only appeared when you had auto layout selected. But now we have that option and we have a bunch of different properties as well, which I want you to familiarize yourselves with before we move forward. So the first option is freeform. This basically means that no auto layout is applied. So it's confusing that they have layout here and then they have auto layout there. But imagine freeform is basically just like a simple frame. You can go ahead and let me just change that to a different color and maybe add a border radius. I'm very peculiar about these things. And you can just like move things around, similar to how you would do that in a simple frame previously. Then we have the vertical auto layout, which basically means that the elements are going to span vertically. And then you have at the third option, which is the horizontal auto layout, which means that you can span things horizontally and you can wrap them as well. So for example, if I enable wrapping, then I can add multiple items. If there's no space, then they're going to go into a second line. The third option, which we want to talk about today, is the grid option. So let's just talk about that really quickly. So I'm going to remove all of these rectangles. And let me just move this rectangle up as well. As soon as you press grid, it automatically adds a 2x2 grid inside of any layout that you've selected. Unless you already have a bunch of elements sitting within it, then it may actually change this 2x2 to 2x8 or 4x4 or whatever it is, depending on the content that you have. So by default, it's going to be 2x2. And I can go ahead and I can click it and I can say, okay, it's going to have these many columns. It's going to have this, it's going to have that. And I can enter a manual value here as well. Like I can say this is going to be 7x70 and it's going to be 7x70. I don't have to limit it to the drag area that I basically have at the bottom, but I'm just going to get rid of that. By default, we're going to play around with a 4x4 layout. So once you have that, you can also see that you have the space in between columns. Like for example, this red space that you see here, then you have the gap in between the rows, and then you have the spacing on the edges of this particular grid. So which is very similar to, let's say, what you would have in, let's say, an auto layout. But what's different here is this particular padding that's being applied as compared to the padding that's applied on an auto layout. A padding that's applied on an auto layout, let's say if I was to, let's say, just draw a button here. This is a button. I'm not sure why I made this button really huge, but just bear with me. So if I have this button, this whole thing is an auto layout, but if I add a padding here, this padding is applied on the inside, not the edges of the auto layout. But here in this particular case, as you can see, we have this grid inside, but the padding is applied outside of the grid as well. So that's a slight difference that you may want to familiarize yourselves with. Then we have these different things, as you can see. This basically means is what's the height of this particular row. So is it going to be auto? Auto basically means that it's going to be equally distributed based on the height of the container. So by default, if we have a 4x4 grid layout, then each particular cell is going to be 25% height and 25% width. If I want that to change, I can go here and I can say, okay, this is going to be, now one limitation that I feel like Figma should definitely fix, I should be able to do 30% and have this based on the percentage of the container, but they don't have that. So I can do 250 pixel width or maybe 500 pixels width, and it's going to be pixel based. And I really hate working with pixel based layout. So if you want to do 25% width and stuff along those lines, I would much rather suggest increase the number of columns and then try to play around with things. And I'm going to show you what I basically mean by that. And very similarly, you can also change the height. Like instead of, let's say, this height being something like, I don't even know what this height is, 25% or whatever the height of the container is, I can say this is going to be 500 pixel and I can change that. Now that we have this understood, I also want you to understand that anytime I'm dragging anything, it asks me, where do I want to place that thing? Like, for example, do I want to place my rectangle here? If I place it here, as you can see, it says 1 by 1 here. It automatically went ahead and made this particular rectangle fill container on both the width and the height. I can decide, okay, it's not going to be filling the container, it's going to be a fixed height and a fixed width, and that can be done as well. And one thing that I want you to also understand is these can be considered as containers or small frames. So if I have anything placed inside of them, I can also align them. So I can say this is going to be centered within this particular frame. So if it's centered, if I try to resize it, it's always going to be centered. If I say it's going to be positioned at the top right, if I resize this frame, it's always going to be positioned at the top right. That's just something that you should know if you're playing around with this, because when you add a text, let's say I'm going to add a text here. Now this is a text. And I'm going to say this is going to be bottom, and then on the left, I can obviously go ahead and do something like that. Now this is always going to be bottom aligned, and I don't have to go ahead and make this a full width or a full height text box in order to, and then play around with, let's say, the alignment here or here to actually resize it. That's an inaccurate way, I would say, of doing it. So that's one thing. Now just going back slightly. Now, what can you achieve with this? Really easy. You can achieve a lot of complex layouts, which are going to take a lot of time for you to achieve with auto layout. Like, for example, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to say this is going to occupy half of the grid. And then I'm going to duplicate this. If I press duplicate, it's automatically going to duplicate the same size. And we have something like this. Then I'm going to reduce the height and I'm going to duplicate it. Then we have something like this. I'm going to reduce the height, duplicate it. And then I'm going to reduce the width and duplicate it. And we have a layout like this, which looks really nice. Let me give some spacing in between here as well. That's equal to the padding outside. So it feels a bit more balanced. If I try to now, let's say if I just want to add 4 columns at the bottom or 4 cells at the bottom, I can duplicate this and this frame is automatically going to be populated. If I want this first element to actually occupy 3 columns or 3 cells, I can do that too. Now imagine a layout like this is so hard to achieve. If you were doing this in, let's say, with auto layout, it would be very hard to achieve. You would have so many containers and stuff along those lines. But now it's really easy to create layouts like this. And once we have a layout like this, it's really easy for me to now go ahead and add images to it. If I just press Command K and search for place image and then search for my images here that I have, a bunch of images, I'm just going to open them and I can just click and add these images to wherever it is that I want. And it's going to look like this. Now, how easy was it to actually create something like this, and how easy it is for me to change it? Like, for example, if I want this to occupy this space, if I want this to be here and occupy this particular height, maybe I want this to be slightly above, I want this to be expanded. It's really easy for me to do all of those modifications without necessarily ungrouping things, grouping things, adjusting layers and stuff along those lines. So it's really easy for you to create things like this and create a magnificent and really beautiful layout. And some websites actually do employ layouts like this, so you can play around with it. Now, obviously, this does not mean that the images are going to constrain their proportions when I resize it. Obviously, if I resize it like this image can never preserve its proportions in terms of the original proportions that it has, because I've already mentioned that, hey, you should always occupy 75% of the height that's available in this grid, and it makes sense. So for those people who are trying to say that, okay, this image should actually be proportionate, like for example, if I say that this is going to be proportionate, and if I try to resize it, obviously it's not going to work. because it's going to respect its image, the image's proportions or the original size of this particular frame, and it's not no longer going to be respected by the actual height that's here. So if you want to play around with proportions in terms of aspect ratios, then I don't think this is a good idea for you to use grids. So that's one thing. So let me just go ahead and remove the proportions, and everything should be fine the way it is. I think I have to manually go ahead and resize it now because I think that got dislinked. So now as you can see, it's all looking good and it looks amazing. So how can you use that in a lot of other places? So I have an example of Untitled UI's blog content here. As you can see, we have a container here, then we have these blog items here and stuff along those lines. Currently, these blog items are a basic auto layout. This whole thing is an auto layout. I have to set a minimum width and a minimum height to achieve a layout like this, because if I did not have this minimum width or a minimum height or a maximum width and a maximum height, if I, let's say, remove this minimum, as you can see, it's already broken. If I go here and if I remove this maximum or this minimum, it's already broken. So now when you're creating things with auto layout, it quite relies on maximum widths, minimum widths to achieve layouts like this if you do not have to add them to a container. If I add these multiple things to a container, like for example, if I just have these 4 boxes within a container, it's automatically going to start breaking. If I wanted to move this particular box or these 2 things at the top, I can do that. That's going to be much more easier. But as you can see, it's not as easy. But now if I, let's say, just go here, remove the auto layout and everything is the way it is, and I just go and click grid. I just do that and automatically it has applied a grid and it is automatically working. Here I can just go ahead and I can say that I want you to be resized to the height of this particular element, and that's it. We have a free flowing grid that I can play around with. Like for example, I can say this particular element is going to be the first one instead of this one. Actually, this is going to be the third one. This first one is going to be expanded. So maybe it's going to be here and it's going to be scaling like this. Obviously, you have to fix the images. As I mentioned, the images are not going to proportionally scale like that, but you can play around with a lot of different things, especially with this particular grid layout. One thing that I do want to mention is the power of grids multiplies when you have grids within grids. Now, a bunch of the stuff that we were doing can potentially also be done. Actually, it can't be done, but if you want to argue for it, can be done by layout grids that we previously had. But layout grids start breaking when you actually have grids within grids. So imagine a lot of people who design websites using Bootstrap, using Tailwind, and they use the column structure of Bootstrap or Tailwinds, which you sometimes may have 12 columns. And you wanted to, let's say, have this particular blog post designed for the sidebar to take 3 columns, for this particular thing to take, let's say, 9 columns, so a total of 12 columns. You can do that easily too. So we have this grid, and then we have another sidebar. We can basically just select the container and say grid. So by default, as you can see, this is a 2x1 grid. So 2 columns, 1 row. We can just change that to 12 because we want 12 columns. So we have 12 columns here. This particular content, let me just select this content. I want to say this content is going to take, let's say, how many columns? It's going to take 7 columns. So I'm just going to go ahead and resize it to something like this. These are 7 columns. Now, one limitation that Figma has, which it should fix, it's not a limitation, it's like something that they missed, is that if you want to see the number of columns, you unfortunately have to go to the bottom. If you want to see the width or the height, you have to go to the bottom. So I instinctually knew that it's 9 columns because I can physically see 9 columns, but I don't really know from here that it's 9 columns. So this is 9, this is roughly 8 and stuff along those lines. So I have to instinctually recognize these things. This is 8 and this is 9, stuff along those lines. So I can potentially make mistakes if the layout is long. And very similarly, I can go here and I can say this is going to be 3 columns. So this thing at the bottom is annoying. It should always also be at the top as well. But now we have this particular layout in a 12 column grid or a 12 column system. And I can reduce the spacing in between as well to suit Bootstrap as well, or any other particular thing that I'm using. And there you go. So even for simple things like that, it's really easy to achieve a layout just using grid. Then I have another example. In this example, we have a dashboard. This is just basically directly within a a frame. There is no auto layout here. If I try to scale things, it's completely broken. Now imagine if I was to make this an auto layout, I would first have to first of all think what I have to do in order to make this auto layout and responsive and everything. because I mean, maybe these 4 cards can be within an element, a container, then these two, like for example, these 4 things can be within an auto layout, then these 2 things will be within an auto layout, then these 2 are going to be within an auto layout, then this 2 is going to be within an auto layout. Then I have to fix that all to fill container to make sure everything is scaling properly and stuff along those lines. So how do I achieve a layout like that? Just by normally converting this to a grid. So first of all, I have to see how many columns do I need. So this is the first column, 1. Then we have second column, third column, fourth column. So we have 4 columns here, right? So 4 columns, and then how many rows do we have? 1, 2, 3. So 4 columns, 3 rows. I think I should be able to convert this into a 4-column, 3-row. Automatically, it suggested, hey, this layout actually would need a 4-column, 3-row. And that's amazing. And now that we have that done, we can basically just go ahead and adjust the widths. So for example, we have this column. I'm going to just go ahead and link it to this particular sidebar. And by link, I mean just resize. So don't think that there's something called a link. This particular first column, I'm going to go ahead and resize it to the header size. And this header, I'm just going to resize it to this particular thing. We have this card. Is it already filling the container? No. So I'm going to fill this to a container. Is this filling a container? No. So I'm going to fill this as well. You can do this by doing this, or you can just go ahead and drag it as well. So it's completely upon you what you want to do here. And let's make this a fill container as well. Let's make this a fill container as well. So we have this particular thing. We have all of these things filling the container. Obviously, I want some spacing in between these elements. As you can see, the spacing is really close together, especially in terms of the rows. So I'm going to select this, and I'm going to make sure the spacing in between the rows should also be 24. So we have this. As you can see, this spacing slightly is a bit too much. So I can also go ahead and decide if there should not be a padding at the bottom. So I can remove that padding from the header as well, and then go ahead and resize this particular row. Like for example, I can go here to this row, and I can say it's going to slightly be at the bottom, and then it's much closer together. And then on the right as well, I feel like there should be some spacing on the right. So how do you do that? How do you add that spacing? I can easily just go ahead and say that there should be a padding on the right of this particular column, and we can do that too. So we have this particular thing created, and now if I slightly resize it, by slightly I mean not too much, as you can see, things are going to scale proportionately. This is not scaling proportionally because the component in itself is not done right. So I can just press enter, and I can make sure this is filling the content as well. So it's going to start working correctly. But as you can see now, it's perfectly fine. If I want to move things around, like for example, I don't want this to be the second one. I want this to be the first one. I can do that. I want this here. I can do that as well. This should be always be on the right. That's fine. So again, it's really easy to create content like this just by grids directly and make things proportional. So now that we have that done, I just wanted to point out 2 other examples. Now I know I'm making this video really long, but I want to provide a lot of value to you guys. So we have this particular thing. This is currently an auto layout. Everything is within an auto layout. These are all rows. Even though we don't need to do rows, we could have potentially combined all of them into a container and then added just a single horizontal flex, and it could have automatically done this. But if we were to create this just by using grid, that would be really easy as well. So the first thing that I'm going to do is, by default, this is not an auto layout. This thing is an auto layout. So I'm just going to remove the auto layout. I'm going to come here. I'm going to remove this auto layout, remove all of these auto layouts as well. There is no auto layout here. Obviously, we can keep this header, and that's it. That's all I need to do to convert this into a grid. I just press grid and it automatically should work. As you can see, it's automatically working. Every single element is now a grid cell. So I can go ahead and I can move this 25 at the top if I want to. I can move this around if I want to, maybe place it here and stuff along those lines. So I can play around with it. I can even add new dates just by duplicating it. As you can see, it is duplicating it. Even the grid height, as you can see, is changing based on the duplicates that I'm making. So in order to make this scale proportionately, I can just apply an auto layout to it. And no matter how many items I add, this grid is going to keep on scaling. So everything's good, everything's cool, and it's a really efficient way of creating things like this without having too many folders and stuff along those lines. If I wanted to add another header, I can just go here. I can go to this particular header. Where is this header? So let's just go ahead and actually select it. This is my header. I am going to go ahead and make this a fill container, make this a fill container as well. to make sure this is actually filling the container. If I duplicate it, as you can see, it's really easy to add multiple headers here as well. I can just directly move it to the bottom as well. So it's really easy, as I mentioned, to create things like this. So I'm just gonna remove that and we're gonna keep this as it is. Now, if I was to create a design that's really awesome with beautiful grid layouts, just a hero section really quickly, how would I do that? So I already have my header created here. I have, let's say, the content, the text that's going to go above, and I maybe need to place some images on at the bottom or at the top. So how do we do that really quickly? Well, first of all, we're gonna see the type of layout that we need. So maybe if I just remove this because I previously did this, I remove this, I add it back again. What type of layout do we need? Maybe we need a 4x4 column. Should that be okay? Or maybe 4x4. So let's do 4x4. That's it. I'm going to go here. I'm going to say the header is going to be the first column, or the first item is going to be in the first row. Then this thing is going to be in the second one. It's going to be spanning completely as well. And I can then add some images here as well. So maybe I want an image here maybe. So an image is going to be here. Then I want some other images. Maybe this image is going to be here and slightly above. Sorry, I'm going to remove the constraint proportions and maybe just add the image here. Then I need two smaller images maybe in this cell, and then I have another image that's going to be here as well. So let's just go ahead and remove the constraint proportions, add it here, and let's add this particular image here and scale it. Remove the proportions, and there you go. We have this layout completed. Now obviously you're going to say, hey Asad, this looks horrible. How are you even a designer if you're designing things like this? So I mean, calm down, I'm fixing it. So let's remove the proportions from here. Let's drag it here, and there you go. I think this is done. Let's go to our first row here. So this is our first row. Let's go ahead and make this slightly reduced. This is our second row, and obviously we need to apply some padding on the edges. I actually want these images to stick to the edge. Otherwise I could have applied the padding to the container or to the whole grid itself, but I like that. So I'm going to keep that, and I'm going to apply 80 here as well, and maybe an 80 pixel spacing and padding at the top as well. So now that I've done that, I can just go here and make sure that this particular height actually is followed here. So now this is our layout. I think it looks really nice. And we can, if we want to add some slight spacing here just to differentiate the images, we can do that too, and it's going to be like this as well. And how easy was it to create a layout like this? I actually like it without the spacing. I think it looks good. So we can do this too. And imagine if we wanted the images to be on the right. That's really easy to do as well. And it's really easy to change these things. Now this image is going to go here. Actually, let's just make two long images. So this one is going to be long image. This one is going to be here. This one is going to be here. And maybe this one is going to be here. Some unique pattern, I guess. Let's make this here. Let's expand this here. And since we have a lot of spacing at the bottom, we can even expand this image like this. So that's one thing we can do. Or we can just go ahead and group these things like this. And I can just say that this is going to be spaced in between. So maybe something like this can actually work as well, and maybe we can have something in the middle. But as you can see, it's really easy for us to create things like this. I can even give spacing in between these images to show that these are separate images as well. And it's really easy for us to create grids like this. I actually don't like that much spacing. So if we, let's say, just reduce it to maybe 64 or 48, this can potentially work as well. I still don't like the empty space at the bottom. So maybe this is fine, never mind. But again, hopefully this gives you an idea of the power of grids. It explains how you can use grids in a lot of different scenarios. I understand this video was really long, but hopefully this is one of the most comprehensive videos out there for Figma grids. That's going to be pretty much it for this video. Do subscribe, hit the bell icon, and I'll see you later. Take care. Bye.